You ready? Hey, grab that right there. Are you ready? Is you ready? Ready? You say you ready?
Raising the Banner Season 2, Episode 2, Facebook Live. We're back on Facebook Live. Not forever, just so you guys know. But we're on Facebook Live tonight just to get people back interested in our show. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, we're back on Facebook Live tonight. Maybe every once in a while they'll do this. Don Tottingham along with the doctor, Garrett Kaloje, back for week 2 of the National Hockey League. Garrett, welcome back in, my friend.
I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be talking about the Wings. I'm happy to not see a Ron Hainsey or Darcy Tucker jersey ever again in my life at Little Caesars Arena, and I'm happy to be talking about the game I love. I saw those last night, by the way, Don. I saw a Ron freaking Hainsey jersey.
Hey, well, they do sell them, so he was there for a hot second. So
he's a good Canadian boy.
Yeah, Toronto. Yeah, so folks that don't know, Garrett did attend last night's game at Little Caesars Arena, which was, in my opinion, I thought the Wings' worst game of the year. Maybe second period on from the third period, perhaps, but I didn't think it was a very good game, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Facebook Live, and of course, we will drop the pod, just so you know. We will post this. You get to watch it live. This is the only time you get to see my ugly mug on Facebook Live for now. We might do some other ones, as I mentioned before. But you got Garrett calling in. The pod will drop. We're going to try to do this like every either Friday or Sunday. Sunday seems to be the better day, I think, for both of us, Garrett, to do the show. And then I can post it on the podcast right on YouTube. So you can... What we'll do is I'll post a link on my Facebook page, so watch out for it. Come Sunday evenings, if you're really bored. It's a perfect chance for you to listen to us on your first drive-in of the week on Monday, because everyone loves Mondays. So you can listen to us live tonight, but going forward, it'll be a recorded podcast, just so you know. So I know that's confusing, but that's where we're at. So
a 45-minute podcast, which is the average drive commute for most Americans. So
unless you live close to I-75. Unless you live close to I-75, then it's 3.5 hours. So we just can't go that long. We could, but yeah. So welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've made it to Season 2, Episode 2. Last week, we kind of gave you a much longer show than we wanted to, just because it's the first week of the year. There's a lot to cover, things to go over, and that kind of jazz. So yeah, that's where we're at. So here we go. What we're going to unpack for you this week. We're going to take a look at the Week 1 recaps, some of the good that we saw out of the NHL this week. And then, unfortunately, with the good, there's always the bad, right? So we'll kind of look at some players that struggled in Week 1, some teams that may have struggled in Week 1. There's still some free agents out there that perhaps, and there's my emails going off. Let me put that on mute. Good heavens. Yeah, you can't ever break away. There's still some free agents out there that maybe some teams, I'm not going to say the Red Wings because we've talked about this in Week 1, that the players we're going to mention on here are probably not on the Wings watch list, if you will. So yeah, there's that. Then we're going to have some games, what to watch for here in Week 2. And I highlighted, I don't know, probably about these 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, maybe about 11 games to maybe watch for this week. If you have the Center Ice package. Also, if you do subscribe to ESPN Plus, by the way, I'm going to put a plug in here for them, and they should think about this later. But anyway, ESPN Plus, if you subscribe to it, it's $4.99 a month. It's like dirt cheap. You get more than just NHL hockey on there. There's a ton of stuff on ESPN Plus that you get. However, they do carry NHL games, and they carry them live. So there's certain games each night that they carry on ESPN Plus. Now, it's not a Center Ice package kind of deal. They just kind of pluck games like they used to and put them on their live. So it's pretty cool. For $4.99, it's a hell of a deal if you ask me, if you don't want to subscribe to the NHL Center Ice package, which is $24.99 a month. So your choice. I have both, much to my son and wife's dismay. But anyway, so we're going to take a look at some scheduled games this week to watch out for. Then from there, we're going to talk about the Red Wings, 3-2, quietly. Anthony Mantha, Dylan Larkin, perhaps good first week. A couple of players that kind of surprised us this week. And then the week ahead for the Red Wings as they go out to Western Canada, everyone's favorite trip. And then we're going to wrap it up with the blog that I put out there earlier for y'all to read. I hope you did. It's only about 354 words about Anthony Mantha. So we'll talk about that. So here we go. Garrett, week 1. Some of the good that we saw in the NHL. You have the Edmonton Oilers team that didn't make the playoffs last year, undefeated. Good start by the Edmonton Oilers, I think. And then they also have another surprising player that's also helped them out in James Neal. 7 goals already for James Neal. He only had 7 goals all of last year. So James Neal, it's good to see a good guy like James Neal coming through for the Edmonton Oilers there. Did you happen to catch any of their games this week, Garrett?
I did not, no. I don't get center ice, and this week was kind of crazy with work. I did see the 4-goal game. I did see some of the highlights of that, but I think it's actually kind of impressive, Don. I really do. I think that for a team like Edmonton, getting off to a fast start like this really reassures some of the fan base who's questioning the move of hiring Ken Holland. I mean, sure, here in this town, people wanted to see Ken Holland go, and
sure,
there were plenty of people who were happy to see him go. I'm not going to say I wasn't one of them, but I definitely will say that I wanted there to be a change as much as you and I both agree.
Yes,
but
sir.
For a fan base that's looking to get off on a hot start and maybe get back to the playoffs, well, this is a better time than ever to get off and get undefeated and kind of set the tempo early.
Yeah, and they did it for the first time since I think it was like the early 80s, and I may have to double check that. They went out on the East Coast. Not like they did these games at home. They went to the island and won in New York. I'm just looking here real quick to see if I can find the other one. They won in New York, New Jersey, and then they also beat the New York Rangers on Saturday. So that was the first time they kind of went on that little bit of a trip there and took all 3 games. And they did it convincingly. It wasn't like it was, shootout kind of deals. They convincingly won all 3 of those games on the road. And they did pick up a couple wins at home earlier in the season. But either way, off to a really good start. Now, one other team that is very interesting, who I've kind of watched here the first week because I've kind of really, after their playoff run last year, the Carolina Hurricanes. They lost their first game last night, but they were undefeated going into that. They were 5-0. And they haven't quietly, very, very quietly, they've started the season at 5-0, and of course now 5-1-0. But Garrett, this is a team that we saw knock off the Capitals in the first round last year, and then they knocked off the Islanders team, which I know the Islanders had the sweep of the Penguins, who we think are kind of falling off the wagon a little bit. But the Carolina Hurricanes, Garrett, I think are scary good, and you and I kind of went back and forth on whether this team's going to make the playoffs or not. I think we both said they were. They might win this division the way they're playing right now. I don't know if they'll keep it up, of course, and injuries and that kind of stuff, but the moves they've made in the offseason, we talked about this in episode 1, they have put themselves in a really good position to win this division, and it seems like nobody else in their division here seems to want to show up the first week of the season.
Well, it also helps that you've got a young, exciting forward, Andrei Svechnikov, who will be back. Or is he back already?
He already is back, and he's played very, very well. He played very, very well the other night against the Islanders.
Svechnikov back there. But having a guy like Svechnikov there, they finally seem to have found some goaltending stability there with Mrazek and James Reimer. Having Sebastian Aho kind of having that top line being where they are.
Sure.
I'm not surprised by it whatsoever. And I think you bring up a good point. There is a good possibility here. We're about a month away from our Thanksgiving. I know to all the Canadian peeps who might be listening to us, happy Thanksgiving, by the way. We can't go without saying that, Don, of course, to our friends north of the border.
That's right.
But we're about a month away from that proverbial 20-game mark where we start figuring things out. And yeah, we're only 5-6 games in. So far, Carolina's been fun to watch. Very fun.
Yeah. They're not doing that stupid, what was it? The Surge or whatever the heck it was.
Storm Surge.
Yeah, oh, Jesus.
Now, see, I enjoyed that, but that's because I'm also a young kid and I don't yell at clouds. So.
Well, it's not like I sit on the front porch with my garden hose. I mean, I just didn't like the. I just don't like the Storm Surge after the game. I don't think it belongs in the National Hockey League. I get it in like ECHL and whatever else, but the National Hockey League, I don't think it belongs. But whatever.
There's a reason why it's not back this year, though. I will say that much. I think that there was probably some sort of pushback at some point.
Absolutely. There was pushback all season.
Don Tottingham's joy, there's no longer a storm surge happening.
Could you imagine? Could you think about this for a second? How embarrassed would you be as a Red Wings fan? And this team hasn't done really anything in a couple of years. The Carolina Hurricanes haven't done shit in what? I don't know. Since 2006? Besides last year's playoff run. I'm not going to put that aside. So think about the Red Wings going out there and doing something stupid like this. I don't know. Flapping their wings as the Wings or something. I don't know. Could you imagine them doing something like that after every win like that? It's like, you're paid. You're paid to do this.
You bring up a fair point there, Don. Right, and I think eventually at some point, conventional wisdom got to those kids, and I guess it is a good thing now because they're kind of backing up the play that in the antics last year with a solid start to the season.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, again, I'm glad it's gone. I hope I never see it. I do like the jerks stuff. I think that's hilarious. I think it's I like how they played into that. So I think that was funny. I thought that was good shade on that one. But yeah. And then another team that's, maybe we could say is surprising. The Red Wings 3-2 start, some ups, some downs. But I think more ups than downs. A much better start than I was expecting, to be honest with you. So 3-2 to start the season. They have 6 points.
I got one more team down.
Yeah, go ahead.
Too, that I think not a lot of people would put up there.
Go ahead.
I think from watching the first week or so of the season, I think Winnipeg's actually been a pleasant surprise for me. I think there were a lot of questions going into this year. Would they even make the playoffs? There was the issue with Kyle Connor, Patrick Laine. Will they finally get their goaltending right? Will they even have a defense? And, Josh Morrissey's been banged up a little bit. Ben Scott left in the offseason. Now Kulikov looks banged up. It doesn't look great. But somehow they're still continuing to just, trudge along and put up all kinds of wins. Hellebuck had a good game last night, I believe. He also had a great game against the Penguins, which, oh boy, that team does not look good whatsoever right now. I think Winnipeg has actually been a pleasant surprise if you're a hockey fan in terms of a team that a lot of people are already writing off too early in the season, now coming around and saying, all right, well, maybe this team is still as good as they were. They just needed to kind of reset things a little bit.
Yeah, and Winnipeg's playing tonight at home against Pittsburgh, too, coming off their victory the other night in Chicago, I believe. Last night, actually, as a matter of fact. So, yeah, you're right.
They were in Chicago last night.
They have been an interesting – I don't know if I would call them a surprise based on their last couple seasons, but, yeah, you bring up a good point that a lot of teams wrote them off. And, in fact, I believe the Hockey News had them like 6th or something like that in that division, which really surprised me. I think they're a much better team than 6th in that division. But again, that's a loaded division. And another team, Garrett, that I did leave off this list, but I do want to put it on there. The defending Stanley Cup champion, St. Louis Blues, 4-1 to start the year. So that's a really good start by them after they lost their first. They did get beat last night in Montreal for their first regular season loss, and they did lose in a shootout to Washington the opening night. But ever since then, they've taken care of business there. So watch out for the Blues. That's a really good division there. The Central is from top to bottom. There's really not a bad. It's really not a bad team in that division. It's going to be interesting to see. Is that the division that maybe gets the 5 teams in the playoffs? And unfortunately, 2 are going to miss it this season. So it'll be interesting to see. The Minnesota Wild haven't been all that bad in that division. The Blackhawks, I know they're 0-3, and that's one of the teams I was going to talk about in the bad, struggling out of the gate. But again, I think it's a young team. They had to travel over to the Czech Republic, come back, and then play the Sharks. And they dropped that game, giving the Sharks, who was another team on my bad list. That was the Sharks' first win of the year. They started out 0-4, and that was their worst start in franchise history since they joined the league, all the way back in 1993, I believe it was. So 92 maybe. So anyway,
all of when I was born, or alive. Not born in 93, but I was.
Interesting fact here, Garrett. The San Jose Sharks, their first season, played at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, just so you know.
I do know that.
I used to watch the games there. It was horrendously stupid. But, that's where they played for their first year before the SAP Center was complete. So, interesting note there. Some other players struggling, Garrett, out of the gate. Martin Jones, goaltender of the San Jose Sharks, and everyone remembers his playoff against the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round. Boy, he was abysmal, but his offense was able to bail him out in that series. He's off to a rough start. for the Sharks. It's almost, I almost wonder if it's the end of the road for him in a way. I guess we'll find out soon enough. Uh, Another player struggling in the net, Jonathan Quick of the Los Angeles Kings. This is a guy, you go back 6 years ago, and him and Jimmy Howard were basically 1-2 for Team USA in the Olympics. And now this is a guy that's struggling to get out of his own way there. So interesting for Jonathan Quick. Paul Stastny's another one that has struggled. Now, I know he did get he scored a goal last night for Vegas in their 6-2 win over Calgary, but Paul Stastny's off to a struggling start. However, I think the Vegas Golden Knights have enough firepower to keep him from jumping off a cliff there. Thomas Hertl, another San Jose Shark that has really struggled this year. I think the thing that's going to help the San Jose Sharks is they did sign Patrick Marleau to kind of get them back on track here. And it seems like after that signing, they went out there and he scored 2 goals in his game against the Chicago Blackhawks. So that was cool to see another 40-year-old like James Neal out there scoring goals. So that was pretty cool to see that. Another player struggling out of the gate that's moved on to Dallas, Joe Pavelski. The Dallas Stars have really struggled out of the gate too. But Pavelski, a guy that I think that is a guy that the Dallas Stars were expecting to be another Tyler Seguin, which I think is a little out of his league. But interesting to see Pavelski. But Pavelski kind of comes on as the season goes on. So it'll be interesting to see what he does moving forward. And another interesting one was Kasper Kapanen. Now, I know you got to look firsthand at Toronto last night. Is Kapanen one of those players, Garrett, that you noticed maybe is starstruck in a way, because a lot of the other players like Austin Matthews, and Nylander has played outstanding for them for the first week of the season. I wonder if it's just kind of they're trying to figure out where Kapanen's going to kind of fill in there, because obviously the Maple Leafs are really heavy 1 through 3 on their first 3 lines anyway.
Well, you know what? I watched Kapanen last night. I thought he stood out and he played a very nice game. I think the one I'm worried more about is William Nylander more than anything else on that team. If I'd be honest with you, I don't think that Nylander's played the same type of tenacity that he did the first couple of seasons that he was in. And I do think that missing, the first 2 months of last year with that contract dispute did hurt him a little bit.
Sure.
I think Kapanen, it's too early now to make, draw any conclusions off of, 5 games.
Sure.
But
I agree with you.
He hasn't looked like the last couple of years out though and make these, not agreed statements, but rush out here and say that, he's going to struggle this year and that we're, Sammy Kapanen's all starstruck. I wouldn't rush out and say that by any stretch.
Sure. No, that's probably fair. I know that some of this stuff is, kind of a stretch after 3 or 4 games, but it is an 82 game season. What do we call this? It's a marathon, not a sprint. So,
yes,
absolutely. Now, there are some free agents, Garrett, that I find interesting that are still available. Thomas Vanek still out there. Brian Boyle still available. Dion Phaneuf still available. Of those 3, my opinion, I think Brian Boyle is the first one probably to go. But do you see a suitor for like a Dion Phaneuf? Because I know that there's been some talk that Phaneuf maybe is like more of a locker room cancer. A lot of players don't like him. Do you see a team that maybe is in a playoff hunt, if you will, or a contender going after a guy like Dion Phaneuf?
I don't think they might try and go after him now. I think at some point they might look middle of the year if there's some sort of depleting hole up the middle, and there's a guy who, and they have a need, maybe not on the first pairing, because he's definitely not a first pairing defenseman like he was with Calgary.
Sure.
But if there's a hold on, and there's let's say a team, for example, like Carolina has an injury, and let's say Brett Pesce goes down or Jacob Slavin goes down for the year, and there's something similar to that. I could see a Phaneuf signing maybe a 1-year veteran minimum deal to go play for a team in the playoffs. I think he's a third pairing defenseman now. I think he's a good third pairing defenseman. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with offering him a league minimum right now when you consider that, he's probably not most defensively inclined at this stage of the game for him. And that he will be a little bit older, but at the same time, he provides you a veteran presence, whether he's good in the locker room or not. So I do think that he does have some value. I just don't know how much he actually has.
True. And, he played with the Los Angeles Kings last year. And was just brutal. Just was not effective at all. And that team was really bad anyway. But the Kings went out there, spent some money on guys that they hoped would kind of get them over the top. One being Kovalchuk. Didn't work out. Dion Phaneuf didn't work out. Brian Boyle, though, to me, it just seems like wherever he lands, he's a good fit. It's a guy that's coming, battled cancer, came back, played with the Devils in the playoff run they had, which was very short, uh, but did play there. He played with Nashville last year. Again, was really short. But he's the type of player that brings a little bit of edge to his game. He kind of reminds me of like a Dallas Drake in a way. So, I see Boyle, I see Vanek going somewhere, but I'm not so sure if Phaneuf is maybe not done. So it'll be interesting to see here in the next couple of weeks if any of these guys get signed by teams that, maybe it's hard to say they're going to make a push in October, for God's sake, but, maybe trying to fill a void if there's a big injury, that it might be interesting to see if that happens. So anyway, that's the good and the bad of week one of recaps. So far.
Can I just say another week
sure.
one bad that I think that this one's getting a little swept under the rug, Don.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought the Devils would have gotten off with a better start than they did.
Good point.
Obviously the Devils are gonna be a fine team this year. They'll probably still make the playoffs. But I thought they'd come out with a little bit more, I'm not gonna say urgency, but I was a little disappointed to kind of see the way that they played. They didn't really go overseas. They did have a couple games over in Switzerland or whatever. It was half the team. It was half the team that went over. So it's whatever. I'm not sitting here saying that they played a regular season game. That's an excuse. I just thought they'd be a little bit better to start the year.
Well,
goaltending is looking like it could still be an issue for them. And, I know everybody likes to say that Jack Hughes is that in the bag of chips, and he probably still will be. But I don't think that people expected the Devils 5 games in to be winless.
Well, here's the thing. They started out last Friday at home against New Jersey. On the road. My bad. At home against Winnipeg. I'm looking at it backwards here. Started out 3-0. Boom, right off the start. Boom, boom, boom. 3-0. And a beautiful goal, by the way, in that game. If you haven't seen it, check it out on NHL.com. They were up 4-1 in that game. Actually, they were 4-0 in that game. Winnipeg came all the way back to tie it and then won it in a shootout. So bad start right off the get-go. You blow a 4-0 lead. Then they go to Buffalo and get smoked. Then they come home, or they go back on the road, to Philadelphia, get shut out. Then they come home to play Edmonton. Edmonton just beats them 4-1. And then they go to Boston last night and lose 3-0. So, yeah, you're right. It's interesting, but they're a very young team. I think they'll bounce back nicely. It's interesting, but you know what? It's very difficult to get out of that hole. I think Dylan Larkin mentioned it the best. I think during the intermission of the Anaheim game, where the Wings started at 0-5-2 last year, I'm sure as everyone remembers. And he said that was one of the most difficult things was to climb out of that hole. They ended up doing it. They ended up getting back I believe back to 500 at one point early there in November. But again, to his point, it was very difficult for them to climb out of that. And it just kind of set the tone for the whole year where they were just constantly behind. So you're right. And especially for a young New Jersey team, it's interesting to see how they'll respond from something like that. So I suppose this week we'll find out as they play the Florida Panthers at home tomorrow, which is one of the games I highlighted for the weekly schedule coming up. By the way, some other games if you want to tune into, if you have the NHL Center Ice package or if you just pirate it or whatever you do. Tomorrow night, Edmonton travels to Chicago to take on the Blackhawks, and the Blackhawks are winless. Edmonton, obviously, as we mentioned, is undefeated. This is the end of their road trip. So it'll be interesting to see that game. Does the Blackhawks get off the schneid? Does Edmonton drop their first game? We'll find out. Then moving on to Tuesday, another team, Garrett, that I almost put on the list, but I took them off because of the game they played in Toronto last week when they put up 7 goals against the Maple Leafs. The Tampa Bay Lightning traveled to Montreal on Tuesday night. Montreal's coming off a win over St. Louis, 6-3, and Tampa Bay's coming off a loss at Ottawa yesterday. So which Tampa Bay is going to show up? I'm not panicking on the Lightning yet, and I don't think they are either, but they are struggling out of the gate, and it's the way they're struggling, Garrett, to me, that is really surprising because they went to Toronto and smoked the Maple Leafs. And I'm thinking, okay, they kicked out of it, and they laid an egg in Ottawa, and I was just really shocked at how poorly they played in that game. That same night, though, Garrett, the Nashville Predators travel to Las Vegas to take on the Golden Knights. I think that's an interesting game as the Predators, kind of a shaky start in a way. They We're down 4-1 yesterday, tied the game at 4, and then it was in 7-4 to the LA Kings on the road. So Nashville's interesting. It seems like they're letting goals in from everywhere. By the way, the Red Wings went into Nashville, as you guys know, on opening night for the Wings anyway, and beat the Predators 5-3. And that was the 12th time of the last 13 games the Red Wings have defeated the Nashville Predators. So I expect a banner to go up in the Nashville arena about that, by the way. So I'll leave it at that. The same night on Tuesday, I highlighted the other game. Carolina travels out to Los Angeles to take on the Kings. Now, this is really the first time the Hurricanes have traveled across the country. I'll be interested to see how they, if they can keep their winning ways going out here on the West Coast. So, those are 4 games right there I highlighted right off the bat. Also on Wednesday, Toronto goes to Washington to take on the Capitals. Should be an interesting game there. The same night, Carolina goes to San Jose. So again, back-to-back nights.
Don, that one's kind of exciting to me. That could very well be a Eastern Conference final matchup if things turn out the way that a lot of people think it could.
Sure.
That could very well be a top 2 showdown there.
Yeah, Philadelphia also goes to Edmonton that night. So Edmonton, depending on what they do against Chicago, will they keep their thing up? Now, on Thursday, I think this is another interesting matchup. Tampa Bay goes to Boston. So that is, how are the Lightning bouncing back? How do they do in Montreal? Are they going to win in Boston? They've had Boston's number, but Boston's also had their number in a way. So it's interesting. That's an interesting matchup on Thursday night. The next matchup that night, the Rangers travel all the way out to Newark to take on the New Jersey Devils. Now that's a battle of 2 teams that have really kind of struggled out of the gate. And it's 2 teams that we kind of thought were on the bubble.
Kakko.
Yes, scoring his first goal. Congratulations, by the way.
Yes, we get Hughes versus Kakko, which I think will be be fun for the whole tri-state area out there. As everybody's going to lose their minds.
Yeah. So, and then on Friday, Detroit goes to Edmonton to try to take out the Edmonton Oilers there, which will wrap up their Western Canadians trip there. So, and then Carolina is at Anaheim. So I know there's some teams I highlighted there that I thought were interesting that have kind of got off to a hot start or a struggling start to see how they bounce back here in week 2. Saturday's filled with a bunch of games too, which is Vancouver's in New Jersey. Vancouver's off to a pretty good start. Then you also have Colorado at Tampa. That's another interesting. I think Colorado's played very, very well at the gate. I believe they're still undefeated as well. And then you have Florida at Nashville. Now, Florida's interesting because we talked earlier in the year that we didn't think Florida had enough to get over the top there, Garrett, and get into the playoff. But I tell you what, the way Bobrovsky's playing this so far, is he enough to get them over the hump and then maybe into the playoff right now, the way he's playing?
He very well could. I mean, I had my trepidations, obviously. I had my concerns with Florida not having enough maybe secondary scoring or a few of these other things. But look, Bobrovsky, I think, is cementing himself as a top 5 goalie in this league. Yeah. And he's really kind of putting himself in a position to maybe carry that team. Maybe a lot like what a Carey Price was back in, I'm not going to say 13, 14, but, earlier Carey Price when he was younger and, Montreal got into the playoffs some years that they probably should have. So I think that that's really the case now. And, if if Bobrovsky goes in and plays against them and plays really well, I can definitely say without a doubt that it would be a statement victory and a statement kind of tour, if you will, for the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, and I believe they stole a game too against Tampa Bay earlier this, there in week 1. I believe it was on Thursday, which was the first game of the year for either team. So it's just interesting that Tampa Bay is off to a struggling start. Florida's kind of holding their own. If they can get some scoring there and get some of their big top talent there to get some goals there, it'd be interesting to see if they can ride the waves, kind of almost like what Columbus did. I mean, Bobrovsky was stellar for them last year. So, can they get that guy to get them over the hump? We'll see. So, as we mentioned early on, that the Red Wings are now 3-2 to start the season. Is it a good start? Yes, because of the last couple of years, kind of what the expectation was. It was good to see them go on the road and beat a Nashville team, which they led from wire to wire in that game. And then come home, struggled a little bit in the first period against the Dallas Stars, and then come back in that game, and not just come back, but they took the lead late in the game for Anthony Manthas. I mean, he scored 4 goals in that game. It was good to see them rebound and get that win, starting out 2-0, and of course they dropped the next game to Anaheim. But then they went on the road and won a game, in Montreal, which is a place, a team really, that they've lost 9 consecutive games to. And it was good to see them get off the schneid, and just the way they got off the schneid. They played a solid game in Montreal, I thought.
Right.
Yeah, and so, Garrett, now, excluding last night, because, I don't want to get too upset about the Toronto game, but Anthony Mantha off to a roaring start for the Red Wings right now. 6 goals in 5 games. He's got 8 points. Is this guy? And you can take this back to March 19th of last year. He has 12 goals, Garrett, in 19 games. I mean, the guy's killing it right now for the Wings. So, and then if you also pencil in too, if you read my blog, his play in the World Championships, where he had, I believe, 7 goals, 7 assists in 9 games. It was stellar for Team Canada. So, Garrett, is this guy starting to come into his own for the Red Wings? Anthony Mantha, that is.
Oh, without a question he is, man. I mean, think about it. You look at, like you said, your reference is March 19th. He had, 12 goals in 19 games. I think the funny thing is he's a guy that everybody was waiting to kind of have that final shoe drop, I guess. It was always coming in every year with, okay, well, can he do this? You knew he could probably score 30, but could he do it? Could he put it together for a full season? And so far, I mean, it's only 5 games in. You gotta, take it with a grain of salt and a caveat. But, for the most part, you gotta sit there and look at, he's made the offseason progressions you'd like to see. He had a strong world championships with a lot of his peers. A lot of those guys are playing in the league right now, and guys who are probably far superior than him as well, too. I mean, let's be fair here. That was a loaded Team Canada team this last year over at the World Championship.
Yeah.
I think that, it does matter a little bit. And I don't know if, he's not going to obviously have, 8 points in 4 games the entire year. He's not going to play on a 2 points per game stretch. But I think he's kind of coming into that, 30, 35, goal, 70-point player that maybe a lot of people want to be, and maybe be a little bit better than that.
He was on pace for 534 points, by the way, after the second game of the season. So down a tick now. Yeah.
Watch out, Gretzky.
Yeah, watch out, Gretzky. Yeah, eat your heart out, son. Yeah. So anyway, another player that's kind of been quiet, though, maybe not so much putting the puck in the back of the net. He's hit every single post in every way possible. However, Dylan Larkin, I thought has played very, very well, Garrett, and he's had a really good first week. And if you ask me, we talked about this, is he ready to put the C on his jersey? The way that he has taken this team on his shoulders, he deserves it. He deserves to be the captain of this team right now. I'd be surprised if they make that call right now.
Coming from you, that's impressive.
I just think it is. I think what he's shown me here this week, because remember, well, Garrett, you probably don't remember this, but in the early 90s, the thing was Steve Yzerman was scoring from the popcorn stand, but it was all about him. And it wasn't until later on that, mid 80s, when they're like, okay, this guy now really is the captain of this team. Even though he had the C for the longest time, he really didn't become the captain of that team until quite later, the real captain, if you will, of that team, really until after Sergei Fedorov got there. Because he was able to play a different style of game. So I see that already in Dylan Larkin, where he doesn't have to be the guy that scores the goals, but he's out there doing the little things to create goals. He made a play last night, Garrett, in the Toronto game, which I just thought was amazing. It was a defensive play. Going up against their first line, I just thought he played a hell of a game yesterday against Toronto. Didn't put the puck in the back of the net. He's quietly got some points this year, but he's a guy that I think has transitioned his game a little bit to be more of a setup guy than he is just putting the puck in the back of the net all the time. So to me, I think from what I've seen, Garrett, he's showing me that he's ready to take over as captain of this team.
Well, and that's a big thing too. He was slated to be that way, and you mentioned it. You were alive during the Heisman era. You kind of saw that happen in that maturation process. I tried telling you that. I also saw that same play last night. I also want to say this, and I don't know if you saw this earlier in the week, Don, but Will Birchfield from 97 on the Ticket wrote a pretty nice shine piece for Philip Hronek, who's off to a decent start this year. He really he kind of made comparisons of advanced metrically and Alex Petrangelo, and he was kind of a late round pick or late second round pick, and Wings might have gotten some value there, so on and so forth. But if people haven't checked that piece out, I'll find a way to definitely try and link that into the this broadcast or whatever. But
yeah,
I'll say this, Don. I was with a friend who traveled down from Toronto, and he's a Leafs fan, and him and I were watching the game, and he told me that was the one guy that stood out to him the most as being a guy that he was pleasantly surprised by was Phil Hronek. And just the poise he had with the puck and the way that he played in the O-zone and how responsible he was playing in all situations and how young he was. He was very impressed by Hronek.
Yeah, it seems like the big stage doesn't bother him at all. That was one of the things I saw that stuck out to me, even in the Nashville game, because Nashville likes to crash forecheck down low, just kind of like what Toronto did last night. And he didn't seem to get nervous with that. He was very, very calm, if you will, in those type of plays. And I think that's the thing you see with the Wings. There's been we've talked about the good and the bad. They've won some games. They've beaten teams in the upper echelon of the league, with Montreal and Nashville and Dallas and whatever. But some of the games in which they've lost against Anaheim and of course Toronto last night, you've seen it with the turnovers. And I've said this: the Red Wings' success in the 90s and early 2000s was because the defense, their first pass out of the zone was always the best pass. And you don't see that. And the reason you don't see that is because, teams back then didn't press our defensemen because, you had Nick Lidstrom back there, which is probably one of the best defensemen ever to play in the game. You didn't do that. You respected that. Now teams they'll forecheck. They'll forecheck our defensemen, get them off kilter, if you will. Try to tip that pass, intercept that pass, slow down that pass, something like that. They'll do something like that to disrupt the play, and you see that. Nashville does a really good job of that. Toronto did a really good job of that last night. I thought intercepting passes, creating turnovers. But you don't see that out of Hronek so much. So it's interesting to say that, you see that, and I'm glad you guys pointed that out yesterday at the game. So very, very interesting. Now, there's two other players, Garrett, that we thought, from our first episode, that we didn't think were maybe even going to be here throughout the season, and that's Darren freaking Helm and Luke Glendening. Now, Darren Helm has 2 goals already. He should have 4, actually 5.
Sure.
I still call him Stonehands, but he has played outstanding on the fourth line for us this year. Even the PK has been even better, and Luke Glendening has been a really good surprise for us, I think, this year on that fourth line. I thought Luke's played a hell of a season this year for the Wings, and those 2 guys who, I didn't know if they were going to make it through the season here, if they were going to be part of that, here's a trade piece at the trade deadline kind of deal. It still could happen that way, but Garrett, if that's the case, they're really helping their stock, that's for sure.
Well, last night, those 2 guys in a good game. Jacob De La Rose played really well last night.
Yes, he did.
It was funny. The fourth line last night was even better, I thought, than the top line.
It was.
I mean, it was kind
of
odd to say for this team right now. It really was.
Well, it's not surprising because Toronto's only really rolling 2 lines right now because they were struggling a bit. They were in a 3-game losing skid coming into that game. I thought you got their best game. And that being said, they pushed really hard. You saw
look at what Toronto scored with last night, though, too. I mean,
the third and fourth lines
all scored last night, too.
That's right. Yeah, and that's what you see. But I thought our fourth line matched them toe for toe. So, and as Dave Chenoweth here is mentioning in the chat, forced mistakes. That's exactly what teams are doing with us. They're forcing mistakes. I think Mike Babcock coined this way back when. Time and zone equals confusion. And I think that's kind of what teams are doing to the Red Wings now. They're forcing them to stay in their own zone, which is causing confusion, which is causing turnovers. Again, I know, Garrett, we talked about this in text this morning. It's still early. Don't get too caught up in that, but it's part of the maturation process, right? So it's a young team. It's just going to happen. You just have to move on with it. So a good start for the Wings. it's better than what I kind of thought was going to happen this year. I was interested to see how they were going to get out of the gate. They definitely seem to bring a lot of enthusiasm to the game. They don't seem to be afraid to hit. There's some open ice hits that I thought Ernie hit a hell of a hit in the Montreal game. I thought that really kind of turned that game around. It was a 1-1 tie, and he laid out. I forget the Montreal player he laid out, but great hit. Just seemed to turn the game around right there when he made that hit. So,
5 minutes will be good.
Yeah. So, okay, real quick here, Garrett, because I know we're kind of up against it. The week ahead for the Red Wings, we're going to continue against the 7 straight games against Canada, where they head out west on Tuesday to play the Canucks, and I believe it would be Thursday in Calgary and then Friday night in Edmonton. So 3 games right off the bat there out in Western Canada. Then they come back home the following week to play the Canucks on the 22nd, and then back on the road the next night in Ottawa. So 7 straight there. That's what you got coming up. Vancouver, a very good team, I think, out of the gate. They won a game last night in a shootout against the Philadelphia Flyers. So a very good game there. Goaltending wise, they've had a really good start to the season. They've even named their captain now in Horvat, as you had mentioned, as we kind of had a little chat about that throughout the week. So interesting there. Maybe we thought Pettersson might be the guy, but I think it was the right call, as you had mentioned.
Right.
Calgary's kind of a mess. I'm not sure what to say about the Flames right now. Their goaltending's atrocious. Riddick is just not any good in net for them.
So, he might be hurt too.
I think he might be legitimately
hurt.
Something's not right. I'll be honest with you. And then Edmonton, as we mentioned, one of the hottest teams in the league right now, 5-0. We'll see if that still holds up when we get to town there on Friday. Now, real quick, I want to close with this, Garrett. I had mentioned in my blog about Anthony Mantha, and if the Red Wings are getting ready to cash in on Anthony Mantha. Now, as we mentioned earlier on in the show, Mantha, obviously this year, no question about it, 6 goals, 5 games. He's got 8 points already on the season. He had a great summer with Team Canada, putting up 9 points in 7 games there. 14 points in 9 games there for Team Canada. And then, of course, how he closed the season last year with the Wings. He was injured for a little bit there midway through the year. He came back explosive in March, in the first part of April. So, Garrett, is Anthony Mantha, are the Red Wings going to re-sign him before the offseason?
There's a very good possibility. If he keeps this up, if he represents the team in the All-Star game in St. Louis this year, yeah, I could see it. So I think maybe they do it after the trade deadline when they're probably dead and gone and out of it. Sure. How much did he get? I think he probably will get closer to that 7.5 number that maybe I mentioned, a few weeks back. I mean, I think it's totally possible. I don't think he gets a bridge deal either now. I think if he keeps playing this way, he might get a long-term extension out of this, and you might end up seeing him here for a very long time, which would be well deserved because he's a player who finally kind of came into his own that everybody was expecting to kind of play this way. Now, it might have been maybe a few seasons too late for some, but
yeah,
you probably would be closer to the 6.5, 7, maybe 7.5 million range.
In the blog, I wrote that Carolina kind of took a gamble on Sebastian Aho, and the Montreal Canadiens threw an offer sheet at him, 5 years, $42 million, that the Carolina Hurricanes had to match if they wanted to keep it. And of course, they did. Now, I think, personally, if the Red Wings let this go into the offseason, there's going to be plenty of teams out there because, as we know, Mantha's a pending RFA, and I think teams are going to throw a lot of money at this guy for long-term deals. I think you could see. I don't think it's going to be Austin Matthews numbers by any means, but I could see a 6-7 year deal worth of upwards of $55 to $60 million thrown at this guy. So I think
the only thing I think I'll say to maybe counter with that logic, and it's not bad logic. I think the fact that the Wings are working with a surplus of cap next year, and that they've had this cap that I've referenced several times on this. I've referenced to you, several different people listen. They're going to have a wealth of cap space. So I don't think for them the offer really comes down to it. Could it be more term that maybe puts a kerfuffle in it?
Yeah, but
here's why I don't think that that really something like that might hurt them really.
Here's my concern with that though: are they going to go after a guy like Mantha and sign him to a long-term deal, or are they going to kind of lock down some of these younger guys that they want to bring up through Grand Rapids? So yeah, there's going to be a lot of cap space left, but keep in mind they got to tie down some of these other players too. So if I'm just going to say hypothetically, let's say the LA Kings come in and throw 7 years, $60 million at Anthony Mantha, are the Red Wings going to be able to match that?
But look at the
I don't know.
Don, I mean, look at the Eisner model when he was in Tampa. I mean, you look at a lot of those guys they still have at that team with Kucherov and Tyler Johnson and Andre Flach.
Yeah.
They've been able to keep that together for so long, not because it was, he signed with the bridge deals. He signed with the long-term extensions when they were young.
Yes.
So they was able to extend that window for Tampa to really add assets and to start.
You're right, and I
don't think he's going to change that philosophy with Detroit.
No. You're right, and so I'm hoping that that's the case. I just don't want them to let this go until July 1, because you're in trouble if you start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it also shows the player that maybe they're not. I'm making the assumption that Mantha's probably going to score 35 goals this year, but let's say he falls short and scores 30. Do the Wings wait until July 1? I think they're stupid if they do that. Considering that would essentially put him at around 50 goals in a year and a quarter. So what do you want? You know what I mean? So my concern is I really hope that they get this done around like the All-Star break, as you mentioned, and get this over with so he can move forward, the team can move forward. And then it kind of locks down your nucleus.
Even if it runs into July 1, I don't expect it to take long. I think that he might be main target for the team to lock up, and they're going to lock up a lot of their young people. It's going to be a relatively quiet off season, I think, on the Wings front. They might sign a defenseman, sure, but I think Mantha might be that corner piece that they're really going to try to lock up early, as quick as they can, and then build that kind of rest of the summer around, him signing that extension.
No, I think you're probably right. I really hope that's what happens. That's what this team needs. So, anyway, Garrett, get out and play some hockey tonight, man. Try not to lose any teeth. I hope you got the full face shield on.
Well, I won't do that. I don't want to lose my father, who I'm actually skating with tonight. Him and I have a friendly wager going down this week, and I'm behind a couple already this week, Don. So I've got some catching up to do. But I think I'll go enjoy myself, and I enjoy doing this every week. And I gotta do some work tonight here. So,
attaboy. All right, good stuff, man, Garrett. I hope your fantasy team in the NFL is doing well. I had a really good day today, by the way.
It's quite all right. Life's good.
All right, good stuff. All right, well, Garrett Kaloje is going to go off and try to skate himself into the boards. I'm going to let you guys go. I'm going to clean up this pod here and download it for you. So if you missed anything, just look for the link. It'll be on YouTube. It'll also be on Facebook. Just click on it. You can listen to it on your drive into work tomorrow or while you're at work tomorrow. I don't care. Whatever you want to do. And then join us again next Sunday. Now, again, I'm not going to do the Facebook Live. You just got to wait for the podcast to come up on Facebook Live. Just click on it. You can listen to it whenever you want. If you're in the bathroom, putting your makeup on, sharpen your skates like Garrett has to do. Whatever you want to do. Join us every Sunday night around 9 o'clock. The pod will drop, so look for it. Again, for Garrett Kaloje, Don Tottingham, Racing the Banner. We'll see you guys next week.